Hello students, Ms. Swanson here, and today we're going to learn all about cells and the organelles within them. Now these are pictures of cells right here. They've been artificially colored so that we can see some of the different organelles. Some of those are ones that we'll be learning today. So normally cells aren't these bright fluorescent colors, but these are here just to show you some of the parts of the cell. So we have 3 learning goals for today: to identify the major cell organelles on a diagram, to describe the function of these organelles, and to compare and contrast plant and animal organelles. So which organelles are in plants, which ones are in animals, and which ones are in both. So these are the diagrams that we'll be using today for plant cells and for animal cells. Now before we get into the specific different organelles and which happen to be in which type of cell, we do notice one main thing is that animal cells tend to be very round and smooth. This isn't always the case, but in general they tend to be round and smooth, whereas plant cells are very angular and they have sharp edges. So again, that's not always the case, but in general that's the difference that we can see between these 2 types of cells. Now we have lots of organelles to go through, so make sure you watch the whole video to completion so that you learn every single one of these organelles. The first one is the cell wall, and this does not exist in the animal cell, it's only in the plant cell. In the plant cell, it's the thick wall that surrounds the outside of the cell. So the role of the cell wall is to structurally support the cell. And here's some diagrams of the cell wall. You can see the one on the top left, shows the cell wall in green. So there's actually 2 cells side by side with their cell walls connected together, and there's some holes in the cell wall so that chemicals and signals can actually be passed from one cell to the other. The other 2 pictures are microscope images that show the thickness of the cell wall and how it compares to the inside of the cell. And then this diagram here just shows how complex the cell wall really is. It's not just one substance, but it's actually different layers of different types of chemicals on top of each other, different types of polypeptides, different types of carbohydrates, all linked together and stacked on top of each other. The next organelle we'll look at is the cell membrane. In the animal cell, this is the sort of outside layer of the cell membrane. So you can almost think of it like a human has skin surrounding the outside of them. Here this is almost like the skin of a cell. The plant cell also has the cell membrane, and it's the layer that comes inside of the cell wall. So the cell wall is on the outside, then the cell membrane, and then the guts of the cell. So the role of the cell membrane is to surround and protect the cell. It also controls movement of materials, so chemicals, different polypeptides, different carbohydrates, and so on. So it controls the movement of these things in and out of the cell. And here's a diagram. So the one on the top left there shows the cell membrane, and you can see how thin it is compared to the rest of the cell. So it's just that sort of almost dotted line that goes around the cell. Below it shows a little bit of the structure. So it's actually 2 layers, and on the outside there are hydrophobic heads of these lipids, and on the inside are the hydrophilic heads that are on the outside and the hydrophobic tails that go on the inside to get away from the liquids. And this is just a more complex diagram of what this membrane actually looks like. So there's actually proteins and carbohydrates and channels that go right through the membrane so that all sorts of things can happen. And here are some more examples of those channels so that things can come inside and outside of the cell. The next one we'll look at is the cilium. So cilium is singular, cilia is the plural. So if there's many of them, we call them cilia. So in this example, there's several cilia, otherwise cilium if there's just one of them. So these are sort of like the little hair-like looking things that come off of the cell. And these do not exist in the plant cell. They're used for either movement or for sensation. So here are some examples of cilia. You can see that they look like little hairs that come off of the cell, and they can bat all in unison to help the cell move, or they can be used to approach different things to sense what's going on around the cell. The next one are the flagellum. So flagellum is singular, flagella is plural, so this cell has several flagella. And these are the longer extensions. They also sort of look like hair, but they're much longer. And these don't exist in the plant cell. And the role of the flagellum is for movement. So the most classic example is a sperm cell. It has one flagellum and it's used to help the cell move along. Below that picture is a bacterium and it has several flagella to help it move along. And this is actually how it works. It's almost like a little crank that spins around like this, and the flagellum is attached to make it spin around, which makes it look like it's waving as the cell moves along. The next part is the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm in a diagram is anywhere that looks just sort of empty, where you can't see a drawing of any sort of organelle, it's just plain clear page. That's the cytoplasm. So that's where it would be on the animal cell, and on the plant cell, again, an area where it just looks like blank, where there's no other organelles. That would be where the cytoplasm is. So it holds and supports the other organelles, and it's almost like jelly. So you can't see it on the picture because it doesn't have little different parts, but it sort of supports all of the other organelles around it. And here's a picture, there's a diagram there. You can see the cytoplasm is just the empty space. And on the right, the cytoplasm is in green. So again, this is artificially colored just so we can see the cytoplasm in these real cells. And so this shows how the cytoplasm goes through the entire cell. And then this is just a diagram to show that the cytoplasm is actually complex. There's lots of different chemicals, different molecules floating around in it. Also, this picture shows the cytoskeleton, which we'll look at in a bit, and how this is a complex structure. So it's not just a gooey gel that's around the cell, but there are different things embedded inside of it. So next one we'll look at is the cytoskeleton. On this picture of the animal cell, it's shown as just these sort of small little thin lines. And then on the plant cell, it's shown almost like little tubes. So both of these are types of cytoskeleton. And you can think of the cytoskeleton almost like your own skeleton. So it supports the cell, gives it its shape. It helps different components of the cell move. So if this one organelle needs to get from one side to the other, it'll actually almost walk along the cytoskeleton to get from one area to the other. And it's made of 3 different types of cytoskeleton. So there's microtubules, microfilaments, and intermediate filaments. Now you don't need to know those 3 for the course, it's just if you're interested, those are the types of cytoskeleton. So here are some examples. You can see on the left the cytoskeleton's been artificially colored in yellow, and on the right it's been colored in green. So you can see that it extends throughout the whole entire cell. The next one is actually a combination of several different organelles, or several different parts of the organelle. So the nucleus is the big circular thing in the center of the cell, and this is what contains the DNA of the cell. So I've shown in a red arrow, that's the big central circle, that's the nucleus. Inside of it there's a smaller little circle, that's the nucleolus. And then the nuclear membrane or nuclear envelope is the membrane that surrounds the nucleus, and the nuclear pores are the holes inside of the nuclear membrane that allow things to go in and out. So these are where those things would be on the animal cell, and this is where they would be on the plant cell. You can see the nucleolus a little bit better here. It's much bigger. The whole nucleus is bigger in this picture, and the nuclear pores are also drawn a little bit bigger in this picture. So we have several roles for each of these. The nucleus controls all cell activities because it contains the DNA, which controls what happens in the cell and what the cell looks like. The nucleolus is the location of production of ribosomes, which we'll look at in a little bit. The nuclear membrane keeps the DNA packaged together inside the nucleus and protects it from the rest of the cell. And then the nuclear pores allow substances in and out of the nucleus. So here is just a diagram. You can see all the different parts. In pink you have the nuclear membrane. It's labeled as nuclear envelope, which is just a synonym here. And you can see those pores inside of the membrane. You can see inside of the nucleus there's the nucleolus, which is colored in purple. You can see the chromosomes and chromatin, which are just a certain type of DNA. And here's another diagram that shows all of these different parts. And here's an example of DNA. When we talk about DNA and when we talk about chromosomes, DNA is the actual substance and chromosomes are a form of DNA. So if you look at the picture on the left, at the top you can see the swirly staircase that we're used to looking at when we talk about DNA, and it's actually wrapped around different proteins. Those proteins are sort of smushed together. Those smushed together proteins make little zigzags. Those zigzags swirl around each other, and then those are what actually makes the X shape that we see when we look at chromosomes. And this is just another diagram that shows the same thing. The next organelle we'll look at is the mitochondrion, and this is in plural, this is mitochondria. So this one, I like to think of it, it almost looks like a hamburger with the little grill marks. So this is what it looks like on the animal cell, and here's what it looks like on the plant cell. You can see those little lines, the little grill marks. And it creates energy for the cell, and it makes a special type of chemical called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and this is what the cell uses for its energy. So on the left you can see there the picture of the mitochondrion with all the little grill marks on it, or what looks like grill marks. And then this is what the mitochondrion actually looks like. So those lines that are inside of it are something called cristae, which are part of the membrane that's folding in and out. And then the very center is the matrix, where some chemical reactions happen to help make that ATP. The next organelle we'll look at is the chloroplast. This does not exist in the animal cell, only in the plant cell. So you can see this is a picture of the chloroplast. It looks different, it looks similar to the mitochondrion, but it's different because in this diagram anyways, it shows two little zigzags instead of the one zigzag of sort of the grill marks. So it's used in photosynthesis to create sugar and oxygen for the cell. So here are some examples of chloroplasts. You can see the little zigzags that were on the diagram. You can see them on the diagram on the left, and they're actually stacks of different membranes. And then on the right you can see the green chloroplasts. Chloroplasts actually contain chlorophyll, a chemical that makes the plants look green. And then here's a diagram of what the chloroplast actually looks like. So you can see the stacks of the membrane, which are called thylakoids, and that's part of where the reactions happen to make the chemical and to give the cell oxygen. Look at the next part is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum and the rough endoplasmic reticulum. These are sometimes abbreviated to SER and RER. So the smooth endoplasmic reticulum on this diagram is shown over on the right, and it's sort of these smooth little flattened circles, and then on the left they look very similar, only there are dots on top of it. We can see on the diagram of the plant cell, very similar, these membranes, these smooth membranes that go back and forth, and there are dots on the rough endoplasmic reticulum and none on the smooth. So the role of the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is to make membrane parts and lipids, and it helps with the detoxification of the cell. The rough endoplasmic reticulum modifies or rearranges the proteins that are made by ribosomes, which we'll look at in a minute, and it contains ribosomes on the outside. So those little dots that we can see, those are called ribosomes. So the endoplasmic reticulum almost looks like a thumbprint or a fingerprint with these sort of wavy membranes that go back and forth. And you can see the rough ER there with the dots and the smooth ER without them. And then here you can see that they're usually connected together. So it goes from the rough endoplasmic reticulum to the smooth endoplasmic reticulum as a connected substance. The next one we'll look at are the ribosomes. So these are those little dots that are on top of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now it doesn't show it in this diagram, but they can also be free floating in the cell. But these are just little dots that you'll see in the diagram. And again, on the plant cell, they're little dots that you'll see on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or you'll see them free floating in the cell. And they make protein, and they can be free floating or attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. So here are some examples. On the left you can see it attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which is shown in yellow, and the little red dots of ribosomes are shown in red, all attached to it. And then on the right you can see them free floating, so you can see the little black circles are the different ribosomes, and then coming out of them you can see almost little tails coming out of them. Those are the proteins that are being made. And this is actually what a ribosome looks like. There's two subunits that come together and they sort of chomp down on the DNA and then produce a tail of protein coming out of it. And so this is what that would look like. So it chomps down, it's on the RNA, which looks very similar to DNA. It chops down on the RNA and then the protein comes off of it. And then here's another example of what that looks like when it's attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. The next one we'll look at is the Golgi body, which almost looks like a stack of pancakes. And so that's where it is on this diagram for the animal cell, and here you can see it on the plant cell on the right. So it packages and modifies proteins and lipids and ships them for either export into the cell membrane, export or insertion into the cell membrane. So here you can see a little bit better, particularly on the right, how it looks like a stack of pancakes. And then on the left, you can see how there's actually little vesicles that are formed. So part of the Golgi membrane sort of chomps off and then goes towards the membrane so that it can either insert these proteins and lipids or it can send them out of the cell. And this is how it would happen. So starting at the bottom in the rough endoplasmic reticulum where the proteins are made, then a little bubble of the rough endoplasmic reticulum comes off and moves up towards the Golgi. The Golgi then takes it in, and then from there, as it moves through the different layers of the Golgi, it'll form another little bubble, and that will go up to the cell membrane where it'll either insert the protein or allow it to leave. The next one we'll look at are the lysosomes. Now, lysosomes look very similar to another organelle called a peroxisome. So in this diagram, they just look like round circles. The way you can tell the difference is that the lysosomes are the bigger, round, empty circles. And they don't exist in the plant cell. So they contain digestive enzymes, and they digest and recycle material needed for the cell. So here you can see the lysosomes, these little dots that are inside of the cell. And when we look at a close-up view of a lysosome, you can see that inside it contains a hydrolytic enzyme mixture. So these are enzymes that help break down different cell components or can break down different pieces of viruses or bacteria that the cell has eaten. The next one is the peroxisomes, and these are the smaller round circles. And these exist in the plant cells as well. They look the same, little small circles. And they're involved in energy metabolism. So here we can see all the different peroxisomes spread throughout this cell. And you can see with a close-up view, it looks very similar to the lysosome. There's just a different chemical inside, urate oxidase, which is, instead of the hydrolytic crystals, it helps with the energy metabolism. The next one we'll look at is the vacuole. It doesn't exist in the animal cell, but it's this large, empty-looking organelle in the plant cell. And so this is actually filled with fluid, even though it looks empty in the diagram. And it stores metabolic waste, and it maintains the shape and structure of the cell. So as it fills up, it pushes up against the cell membrane and the cell wall to help that cell stay big and rigid. So here we can see some diagrams of the vacuole, and you can see how it's a big empty space on these diagrams that helps push everything towards the side to keep the cell holding its shape. The next one is the centrosome, or the centrioles, and in this diagram it almost looks like a bunch of rods all stacked together beside each other. Doesn't exist in the plant cell. And it produces and organizes the microtubules, so those are part of the cytoskeleton. It organizes the movement of DNA during cell division, and we're going to talk about cell division a little bit later in this course. And it's the main part of the centrosome, the main part of the centrosome is a pair of centrioles. So there are two centrioles inside of the centrosome. So these are what the centrioles look like. They're triplets of tubules that are arranged around in like a circle, and they're all almost attached together. And then you'll have two of the centrioles inside of the centrosome. So there you can see the centrosome with these 2 points, and those are the two centrioles. And there's another picture of the centrioles. So here we have our animal cell. Now hopefully you can look at this diagram and recognize some of the organelles that we saw. The purple nucleus, around it there's the blue endoplasmic reticulum. On the right, about halfway down, we have the Golgi, we have some orange mitochondria, we have some lysosomes and peroxisomes, those round circular substances. The bright shining yellow thing would be our centrosome, and then we have the cell membrane around it with the flagellum and with some cilia. And then here we have a plant cell. We can see it's much more angular. It's got the cell wall and brown around it with the cell membrane inside of that, the purple nucleus with the endoplasmic reticulum around it, the clear empty vacuole in the middle. We have the green chloroplast and the orange mitochondria. We have the sort of brown colored Golgi on the left, and we have some peroxisomes, those round shaped things as well. So we look again at our learning goals. Can you identify the major cell organelles on a diagram? Can you describe the function of those organelles? And can you compare and contrast plant and animal organelles? If you can do this, fantastic. If not, please rewatch the video. And if you're still having trouble, come ask me in class tomorrow. All right, that's all for now. Bye-bye.